Today we're talking about RAW versus JPEG. Okay, is this a clickbait title? Well, maybe a little. I normally don't do clickbait titles, and this technically isn't one, but it kinda is. But this really is an ongoing subject amongst YouTube photographers, and especially Fujifilm photographers, because the JPEGs are so good out of these cameras. But let me say right off the top, if you shoot JPEG only, awesome. If you shoot RAW only, awesome. If you shoot both, that's great too. I don't really care. This is just a discussion. A short discussion at that, hopefully. Personally, I always shoot RAW and JPEG. When I was shooting with the Canon DSLRs more often, I would be more apt to shoot RAW only. The JPEGs were great, but I never really played with any of the JPEG settings, so oftentimes my JPEGs would look exactly like my RAWs, and any image system I was viewing them in, I could view both of them at about the same speed. So other than maybe some file saving space if I wanted to shoot JPEG only, there wasn't a huge benefit for me to shooting both. But oftentimes I still shot both, even on the Canon system. But definitely with the Fujifilm system, it's just really fun and beneficial to shoot both RAW and JPEG. As I assume you know, one of the biggest benefits of the Fujifilm system is the awesome JPEGs that come out of the cameras. And one of the aspects of those JPEGs is how we can customize the film simulation. We can choose a film simulation in camera, which those right off the bat are awesome. But we can make customization to those, which the community has called recipes, and we can create these film-like or different looks in camera that kick out really cool, unique JPEGs. And those JPEGs in and of themselves can kind of be completed works of art, which is pretty cool. So a lot of people choose to only shoot JPEGs because they like that workflow. They choose a simulation or they input a recipe and shoot JPEG only, and then the JPEGs are their work. They're done. So they shot it and they're done. For me personally, most of the time, the JPEGs, even if I'm using a recipe, the JPEGs will serve as inspiration. So I'll choose a recipe that's almost like the film stock that I want to use on that day, and I'll go out and shoot the whole shoot with one, maybe two simulations, but oftentimes I'll just choose one and shoot the whole thing with that, almost like I'm just choosing a roll of film and shooting with that. And then when I get back to the computer, I'll browse through the JPEGs with the simulation, obviously, that I chose, and if I find images I really like or that pop out at me, sometimes I'll share those right away. Those will go to Instagram, or I'll just mark those with the intent of revisiting the RAW file and editing that RAW file. So, and sometimes I'll edit the RAW file to mimic what the simulation recipe was, but sometimes I'll go in a completely different direction. But having that starting point of that film simulation or film simulation recipe that I chose for the JPEGs, it can move me in a few different directions. Sometimes it's inspiration. Sometimes I realize that it's not the direction I want to go. I want to take the image in a different direction, and that's where the RAWs come in handy, because now I have the freedom to do that. I love the post-production process. That's part of this. That's part of photography for me. That's one thing I've really enjoyed about my film photography the past couple of years, is making the image in the darkroom. This is a printed image that I showed in my XE1 video, but still, my point is, holding that final image in the darkroom has been one of my favorite parts of film photography. So in film photography, that darkroom work, the work you do in the darkroom, is part of the photography. It's part of the whole thing. At some point, with film photography, at some point that image gets printed, whether it's by you or the lab you send it to. So somebody's making, even subtle, but somebody's making some decisions for your image, getting it from the negative to the printed paper. Someone's making those decisions on how much contrast there should be and how much should they dial it back. In the darkroom, I love making those decisions on my own. I take that mentality to the digital workflow, and I love the post-production process. I love tweaking the settings, the contrast, the brightness of certain areas, and all the different possibilities that lie in the post-production work. So editing a photo in the darkroom or editing photo in Photoshop, those are the extremes where you're taking complete control of the raw image or the negative. But even if you shoot JPEG only, and that image that the camera saves is your final piece of work, even if you do that, technically you're making some creative decisions from the get-go. You chose what film simulation you're going to use, or you created your own film simulation, and that means you chose how much contrast and how much saturation and all these, and sometimes the grain. You made these creative decisions. You just made them more up front that affected that final image. So whether you shoot JPEG only and a lot of your creative decisions are made up front with that simulation, or whether you shoot raw and edit in Lightroom later, once you have that final image, it really doesn't matter, right? I mean, as long as you have achieved what you want to achieve, again, it's like who cares at that point? It really doesn't matter in the long run. Especially with the Fujifilm files, the JPEGs are definitely printable, and obviously the RAWs are extremely flexible, so you can do whatever you want there, and both paths can lead you to a really solid final image. It's just up to you to decide how you want to get there. You have to figure out the creative workflow that works well for you. What's your preference? There is no true photography or pure photography in terms of how this is supposed to go. For one, things evolve, technology evolves, and we have a lot more tools and resources to play with. Also, if we're all using film photography as inspiration, again, like I said before, you have to realize that there's no such thing as JPEG only with film photography. You have to process the film, which gives you, well, if you're shooting negative film, that is, the processing the film gives you negatives first, and then at some point somebody's got to take those negatives and then turn them into a positive print, or scan them and turn them into a positive image scan. But even if you think you're not doing any editing of those files or that negative, at some point the image is being adjusted from its source. So my point with all this is that there's no true or pure photography. Editing in one form or another, or the evolution of the image that you're creating, is part of the photography process. That's part of it. It's not all just about the snap. Sometimes you're making creative decisions now beforehand that affect the final image, or you're making creative decisions after you've taken the raw image that affects the final image. But at some point you're making some decisions. So we all have our own way of getting to the finish line of a good image, and there's no right or wrong way. So although it's great to watch all these JPEG only videos or raw only videos, or to keep discussing this, it's fine and healthy, but I think just take comfort in the fact that whatever you feel comfortable doing is right for you, and that's totally cool. You have the freedom to experiment and try different workflows and try different things. So I think that's it for now. I think I got the gist of what I wanted to across. Like I said, I found my personal preference, which is RAW plus JPEG, and using the JPEGs as inspiration or filtering through them to decide which RAW image I want to go and spend more time with and edit to the point to where I think it's done and printable. So let me know in the comments about your workflow and how much you shoot RAW versus JPEG, or do you always shoot both? Let me know, and let's get a healthy discussion going in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys later.